Right, we are live. So it is Sunday, 11th of July, 2021. And this is episode 8 of Part of My Journey. And today I have 3 special guests. I've got DJ Babs, Derek Westerholm and DJ Nico, and they're all from Toronto in Canada. So it's a Canadian episode. So it's going to be interesting talking about some Canadian stuff and UK stuff and obviously lots of different issues that we're going to be going through. So let's introduce the guests. So we'll start with DJ Babs and Derek. How you doing?
Hello.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
It's good to have you both on. Let's do a bit of sort of info about you because people may know who you are, they may not. Babs, should we start with you? So tell us a little bit about your sort of musical background and
for sure. Well, I just want to say I am a proud member of the 45 Queens Collective. So as I wanted to show off my T-shirt because I'm very happy about it. Music, oh boy, music for me, and I think like a lot of people on the streams, for all of us here, it was pretty much for me right from the beginning. I definitely remember having one of those little tiny record players and 45s. I had the not the Fisher Price one, but I had like a kind of probably similar to what a Crossley would be. Maybe it was a Crossley too. And Disney used to make the read along, play along records. And so when I was 4, I would play those little 45s. Like I think when I did I talked about the 45 haunted house, the haunted house one. And that for me was a huge thing. And my parents were very much into music. My mom's family was quite musical. And my dad was a bit of an audiophile. He had a really amazing record collection. It was the 70s and he had this like big teak wall unit. It was just jammed with like all kinds of records. And he had really great taste in music that was just wide and varied. Like my mom listened to like Yeye and French music and because they're European, my mom is Swiss and my dad is German. And he would listen to everything from like kind of reggae to Kenny Rogers to Kraftwerk to, he was very adventurous in his taste, which was great. I listened to music. I think I remember the first time I was allowed, because it was a different time then. When I was 11, I was allowed to take the bus to go to the town over, which was Oshawa. We lived in Whitby at the time. And I was allowed to go to the Oshawa shopping center and buy records. And I started at like 11. And I remember buying, it wasn't a 45 that I first bought. It was a 12-inch actually. But played on.
You're off the show. That's
I know. Played on 45 though. And it was a Duran 12-inch, which I probably have somewhere here off to the side.
Yeah.
And I really loved New Wave, and I loved like Thomas Dolby, and I loved Duran Duran. And I remember buying a copy of Nevermind the Bollocks, Here Come the Sex Pistols.
Right.
And my mother being like, oh, and my dad kind of being like, I think it was like, it's good rock and roll. It's good rock and roll. It's like, which is pretty funny. And we had music all the time in the house. Sunday brunches were like a big thing where we would listen to classical music and we'd have these very long extended family brunches. And that was kind of a thing. And I loved playing music and I loved singing, and my parents gave me piano lessons. I was terrible at it. I kind of used to audition for theater, for kids theater stuff, and I would never get taken. And they would always say, well, no, we're not taking you because they're like, your voice is too loud. And I was like, well, what do you mean my voice is too loud? They're like, you stick out. Like, we don't want you in a choir. You stick out. You're too loud. Whatever. And long story short, what happened was that when I was about 13, 14, my parents separated and we moved to a small town called Cobourg here in Ontario. And Cobourg had like a very rich arts scene. They had like a symphony orchestra. They had like a children's theater group. They had a semi-professional theater group. And my mom was like, busy single working mom. And she was like, off you go make friends, go audition for this thing. So I auditioned for this version of Oliver Twist, and I chose that they did not want to keep in the show. And that kind of set a trend too. Like I always liked singing the songs that nobody else was interested in, or the weird songs, or the songs on the record that were like the B-side that like, I was always about the anti-hit.
Yeah.
So I sang this song, and it was this big sort of overblown, grandiose kind of overblown dramatic tune. And there was this older lady on the jury panel. And she said, you know what you're doing when you sing like that? And I was like, I kind of am pretending to be an opera singer. And she's this like grand dame, you know, his white hair, his big booming voice.
Yeah.
She's like, darling. She's like, you are an opera singer. That's why. And they put the song back in the show, gave me the part.
Yeah.
Which again I was never the ingenue. I was never the pretty young girl. I was always like kind of the witch or the evil woman or the like loud, weird lady. Makes sense. And so it went from there, and very, very quickly things accelerated like super fast. And I started getting singing lessons for free and was just like completely immersed in this world of like classical music theory. But on the other side, I was still listening to like CFNY, which is this amazing radio station. I'm sure Teresina will talk about it too. And they played like two-tone, they played new wave, they played no wave, they played like Dr. Demento late at night on Sunday nights. And it was just this like crazy station that played all of this great music. And so I was still listening to like, you know, The Cure. I was still listening to like, you know, OMD. I was still listening to like, you know, all of that. And that didn't change. So again, it was like this two separate streams of music. Long story short, I went to university and actually did a degree in classical music and finished. Wow. I was very accelerated through school. I started university when I was 17, which is a very interesting experience. And I kind of always felt like I was very othered because I was always a year younger than everybody else and I never really fit in. And I was hoping that when I got there that I was going to fit in. And I didn't. Mostly because I was much younger than everybody else. And I was the girl with purple hair and combat boots, singing all the weird shit that no one else wanted to sing. You know, so I didn't really make a lot of friends there. But I had a whole other set of friends who were also musicians, and they were kind of playing in bands and stuff. And I think I realized very quickly after I graduated, and I graduated, I think when I was like 21, 22, I sang professionally for about 2 years, and I realized this is not for me. I'm not going to make money at this. I started smoking a lot of weed. And I was like, and I didn't have the luxury of rebellion when I was a teenager because of the way my family situation was. Like I had to grow up really fast. I had to be very responsible. I was kid who was out drinking and partying and like all of this stuff. And for me, I think it was my early to mid 20s where I finally became the teenager that I kind of always wanted to be. Started playing in bands, started playing around in Toronto, played in a couple bands. At one point we played at the El Macombo, which is frequently, which is an amazing club. That's where I saw this guy for the first time, probably in my mid to late 20s. Hello. And then things kind of didn't take off really until I was about 27 or 28. And I fell in with a group of friends who some of you may know. It really depends on what musical scene you're in. But if anybody here is sort of familiar with like Feist, with Peaches, with Chili Gonzalez.
Yeah.
So we all came up in the same scene in Toronto. Wow. We were all kind of hanging out and influencing each other and sharing music and playing in weird bands together. And I think Chili Gonzalez, like he was the first guy I ever saw making music on a computer. Like he had a early version of Pro Tools, you know, and we were all singing on each other's tracks and playing in each other's bands. Peaches and I had a band that we started called Rocket Tits, which was the two of us. And it was her on bass, I think, and me on guitar, and we had a drum machine and we just like screamed. It was ridiculous. You know, and it was really an exciting time, and it was like, wow, this is amazing. And it was a good time. And, you know, I mean, it was really tough. And this sort of, again, kind of played into, oh yeah. And I have to kind of think like that's about where I started DJing too. And that's how that happened, because I had this tiny bubble top record player and I'd always collected records. I kept all my records from when I was young, and people would come over and hang out in my living room. And I would play just what the fuck ever on my little bubble top. And one night we looked around and there were like 20 people in my basement. And someone turned to me and they were like, you should get a DJ gig. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, well, you know, like, let's do that. And I was very fortunate. I think my very first DJ gig was me and Chili Gonzalez. And we were playing like and Lounge and Giorgio Moroder records at a place called Lava Lounge. And that would have been like 1990. I want to say like 1997 or so. And then I was really lucky to fall into being offered a weekly gig at this place called the Bovine Sex Club in Toronto. The Bovine Sex Club, if you know Toronto, is like, it's kind of like our CBGBs here. There's tons of metal shit on the wall, and it's kind of like the rock glam bar. And it's, and I did a residency there for pretty much for like 5 years, every Friday night. And we played post-punk, new wave, glam, rock, you know, and it was me and my best friend who her name was Barb as well. So we were the two Barbs, and we were like, you know, young and beautiful in our 20s, like causing shit. Got pretty intense. And I ended up leaving that gig because my band started doing pretty well, all things considered. It was a really tough time for me because I watched Peach and Gonzo. They kind of left and they went to Berlin. Everybody went to Berlin. Yeah. I couldn't go because of a couple things. My dad had died a few years earlier, and I was looking after my grandparents and was pretty much their sole caregiver. And so I couldn't go. And it was really hard because I feel like oftentimes I'm like, if there would be like an alternate universe and I had gone to Berlin, would things have been different? I don't know, you know?
No. Yeah, you never know, will you? That's
no. And there was this profound sense of abandonment. Like I felt like I had been abandoned by my friends, and then to watch them like just ascend insanely, you know. Yeah. Like, see, I mean, I'm like, you know, I'd watch the Grammys and Feist was on there. I was like, holy shit, like I was in a band with that person. And you're happy for them. You're like, holy cow, like this is brilliant. But also too, you know, there is then this feeling of like, I'm not good enough. Not it could have been me, but more so tying into sort of my previous experiences of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not talented enough. I wasn't worthy. You know, and that was a really hard journey to take. And I think what I did was I got very angry at that point. I was really fucking pissed off. And I poured all of that energy and that anger into my own band. And we were called Procon. It was myself and we were a duo. And again, it was around that 2002 to like 2008 or 9, we were really active. And we were very fortunate. I mean, you know, we got picked up by an indie label in the States, run by two amazing Mexican guys, swanky boys, Juan Martin del Campo and Manuel Gutierrez. And they signed us, and we were label mates with, you know, again, some very indie underground artists that I super admired. And we had the opportunity to tour the US a lot. You know, we played CMJ a couple times. You know, it was great. I mean, it was a really good time. It was hard work. It was a lot of shovel and spit. It was super intense at times, but it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we were really embraced by the LGBTQT scene. They loved us, and they loved the kind of music that we were making because it was very electronic informed. We loved, like, I love Detroit techno. I love, you know, Kraftwerk. I love, you know, I love Hashim. I love, oh my God, I'm going to brain fart now, but like all the artists that we love, but I also very much came from like the European informed, like Euro disco, Italo disco. And also too, we were very song based, which was kind of different, right? Like we wanted to make songs and craft songs. And that was kind of the difference. And then of course the whole new rave scene was happening. So it was very promising and very exciting for quite some time. You know, and we traveled and played and things, you know, things kind of petered out. But beforehand, I mean, we toured with a band called, no one ever knew how to pigeonhole us. Like we were kind of goth, but we were kind of punk, and we were kind of electronic, and we were kind of techno, but we were like, so no one really knew what to do with us at any given time. So we managed, you know, like we play anywhere and everywhere. We did a lot of remix work to kind of pay the bills. Probably one of the highlights was I actually got to remix, a Duran Duran track. And I remember like having to play over John Taylor's bass line because John was my favorite, and playing over his bass line on my Korg and weeping and with joy. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. They hated it. They did not release it. They couldn't stand it.
You still got to do it. You know, that's the
really hard to work with, actually. They're really and then we ended up doing a bunch of remixes, and one of them for Mindless Self-Indulgence. And like one day we woke up and we were like, holy shit, it's charting on Billboard. Like it was like on the Billboard, like, you know, and it was just like, but we couldn't get arrested anywhere. Like, you know, we couldn't get press in our hometown. We had a really hard time getting shows here locally or like any kind of foothold. And that really wore down on us. And we gave up. We were just like, you know, we're not doing this anymore. And we stopped, and we were in a relationship too, my bandmate and I, which I think probably it was a business arrangement between friends. Like we were great friends. I think when you make music with someone, there is that bond, you know, and this goes for DJ partners too. You know, it's family. And I think because of just the nature of Well, we're working all the time, so there's no time to go out and meet people. We're touring all the time. And I think you kind of reach, and again, for a lot of my relationships up until a certain point, it was kind of like, yeah, you'll do. Okay. Oh, this is as good as it gets. This is what I deserve.
Okay.
This is as good as I can have. And so that was acceptable to me. And all through that time, just DJing all the time, whenever I could, having some great gigs. And then 7 years ago, I was approached by an amazing guy named George, and he owns a club called Piston. And he was like, hey, he's like, my regular DJ partner can't make it. Do you want to come in and DJ with me? And it was one of those things where it was like, just like, oh, like magic the first night. It was like, oh, you're playing the I'm playing the it was just like this like amazing energy and vibe. And he was like, listen, he's like, we're going to do this like on the regular. And I think it's been almost 7 years. And that's where I met Teresina. So I've been doing a monthly every last Saturday of the month. And that's my baby. Juicebox is my baby. So, and that's where we're at now. And then I'm going to let Derek talk about our new exciting project, because I've probably talked a lot.
I'm just going to bring Teresina in first, if that's all right. I'll bring Teresina in. We'll have a chat to her, and then we'll come back to you, Derek, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, we've also got Teresina, DJ Nico. Welcome. All right. Well, similar sort of thing. Question for you. When did how did your sort of musical career start? Where are you at the moment? And I see we've got quite a lot of all of your friends in here. Some of your friends. We got we got Bella Von Doom, Iris Mountbatten, Shellio. I apologise if any of these names are pronounced wrong. Not so wet. I'm not sure if I got that one right.
Not so quiet.
Not so quiet, of course. Not so quiet. It's Twitch. It does it. And Juanita in here, who I definitely know.
Cool. That's
Jawa. But yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay. So Teresina, tell us a little bit about you.
Wow. I started. I don't know what got me into music. I think probably my dad and my brother. I think I've mentioned this before with an interview that I did for you for
45-day radio show, yeah.
But yeah, just my dad loved frequenting garage sales and would pick up records all the time, even 8-track tapes. Like I grew up with a stereo console at home, and so I was exposed to records, cassettes, 8-tracks. All that stuff. So yeah, my dad was very musical. He never played in a band or made music, but could pick up tunes, and he was he could know and play things in tune very well. So I always had a love for music. So yeah, when I was about 14 or 15, my first job was at McDonald's.
Most people.
Yeah, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I used to take all my whatever money I had, and I would go downtown on my own to this one place called it was underneath the Zanzibar, which is a strip club. But there was a place in the basement that would sell posters for bands. So I used to go there, and there was also a back room where people, mostly gentlemen, it was a peep show, basically. They could go watch porn in the back room. And here's me, 14, 15-year-old kid, like, I love that poster of U2 and The Cure and the Smiths. And so, so that was my entry into the seedy world of Yonge Street, the downtown sort of main strip of Toronto. So at that point, I started going to record fairs. I guess I would find out from people, because I would go to, along that strip of Yonge Street, there was many record shops. So A&A Records, eventually HMV got landed there in the 90s.
That one was pretty big.
Yeah, and Sam the Record Man was the two big record shops. So I'd go there and look at records and buy singles. My obsession was U2 at the time, so whatever I could get my hands on.
That's interesting you mentioned U2. Actually, I was telling a story yesterday because one of the first big gigs I ever went to was U2 at Wembley Arena. And they were amazing, but then I was remembering who was the support, and it was the Stereo MCs who were amazing, and then Bjork. This was around the time when Debut came out, and I think I was about 18. This is 1994, but yeah, I mean, I used to love U2 back then. But yeah, no, go on. So
yeah, so record fairs were the big things. Well, there was one record fair that I knew that existed, which was at a Legion Hall in Etobicoke, so the west part of Toronto. And I'd go there, and I was literally like one of the only females, and a young female. The rest were like gentlemen who were in their, I don't know, 30s to 60s, who would, come out of their basements to sell their wares. So I was buying bootleg CDs. At the time, it was starting to be CDs as well as records. So yeah, that started me on this path. Whenever there would be record fairs within the city, I would check them out. They would mostly be more funk and soul related, and I was more into Britpop at the time. But yeah, like Babs, radio was huge for me, and the radio station CFNY, as well as CBC, Brave New Waves. That was another program that would be on overnight. Like, I think it was midnight the show would start, and it was 2 or 3 hours of just incredible music I'd never heard before. You wouldn't hear on the pop radio stations here. So it introduced me to post-punk stuff and all the stuff that was happening in the UK. So it seems like...
I was going to say, I mean, how big was Britpop in Canada? Was it...
It was pretty big. Yeah, most of the bands traveled through Toronto more than any other city in Canada, I think, because even Montreal didn't get a lot of the shows, but we had everybody come through Toronto. And even with music festivals in the summer, we had CFNY would host this like overnight music festival. Yeah, overnight. Like an all-dayer kind of thing, and that's where I saw on one bill Ned's Atomic Dustbin, Elastica, and Blur, and I can't remember if there was anybody else, but those were the big like shows we would get to see. So yeah, and UK music was always huge in Toronto, even in the 70s and 80s with punk, with the new wave post-punk stuff, into the 90s with Britpop. It's always been huge here.
I mean, is it? It's interesting to know. I mean, is obviously the language is the same, which helps. But is it because it's so different to your sort of neighbours, the American music? Is that why it was so popular, or did it just have its own sort of ethos and style that attracted sort of fans in Canada, do you think?
Probably the fact that we're a Commonwealth country and a lot of
totally
Brits here. Well, I think a lot, and then just having radio stations that brought that music and introduced us to that music. So I think it's a lot of that. Yeah, because I mean, Toronto is such a multicultural city. And I mean, the influx of immigration from the Caribbean as well as the UK and Europe. Like we have so many options for music and culture here. We have neighborhoods that are specific to different cultures. So I think even the Jamaican like reggae and ska scene was always huge here as well, from the 70s into the 80s. And then I mean, even via the UK, because of all the immigration to the UK with people from the West Indies and the Caribbean, and we got that filtered through the UK here as well. So interesting. I don't know. I think it's just a lot of our history and the fact that the Queen is on all of our currency, and it has been for so many years, that there's just this connection to England. So.
Yeah, it's just interesting. So I can't. Obviously, there's some Canadian bands that I know, but I can't think of there being, for example, the Canadian pop or something equivalent sort of happening, or us being on my radar. I mean, I may be wrong, and maybe it is out there, and I just haven't found it. But it's just interesting to see.
Yeah, I think in what happens is people don't realize. Like, I've done a few radio shows for Mono Local Mixtape on Soho Radio, and I've featured Canadian music a lot, just because. Yeah. In many cases, I'll have friends rate me and say, I had no idea that Joni Mitchell was Canadian, or that, they just don't know that, that artist who's huge is actually Canadian.
Yeah.
Even with Peaches, like a lot of people didn't realize that she's from here.
I mean, I was a fan, and Chili Corns as well. But again, I just assumed they were from Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
You just didn't. And obviously, this is days before internet and all the rest of it. You only had limited amounts of information that you might pick up in a magazine. But that's interesting, really interesting stuff. I'm going to jump back to Derek, if that's okay, and we'll get Derek to introduce himself, and then after that, we'll move on to some other issues. So, Derek, hi. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me part of this. That's amazing.
No, of course. I mean, it's great to have you on board, and I think you're our first couple on the show, which is good. So that's fine. So, talk about your sort of musical background and where you are now.
Well, my music background is very kind of DIY, I suppose, kind of do it yourself. I'm not classically trained or formally trained at all, but similar to Babs and similar somewhat to DJ Nico there too. I had a family that was into music, and my dad would go to the library. He'd wake up first thing in the morning, go to the library, come home with a bunch of stuff, mark down which songs he likes, tape them onto mix tapes, catalog them on paper, put it into a loose leaf binder, catalog the tape, and he'd give it to people. So he was essentially his one-man playlist. He was a streaming service himself. And
Spotify was the thing.
It was very funny, Nothing would bring him more joy than to pass on his tapes to people, and you could see that they loved that he did it too. So I have a very positive association with music through him, and got to hear tons and tons of things because of it. I mean, everything from polkas to Hawaiian to big band to classical, and then as we got into things like punk, post-punk, and my brother and I made music ourselves, those would slip in, whatever was tolerable to him, mixtapes. It was kind of cool. So that and my brother, having been older and being in musical comedy and having a record collection of his own, that kind of got me into all of that. And I got into it a bit later. As early teens, I heard so much music around the household, I was never sure where my allegiance was to it, or even had a strong connection. But eventually, through my brother's collection, I heard Elvis Costello and The Clash and things like that. And suddenly The Clash made sense to me. And I guess Elvis Costello early on, I would kind of resonate with. And then, suddenly it just got me really into punk, post-punk, and DIY, indie, and ska, all that, anything in that area I got super into. So from there, I ended up doing a radio show and forming a band all around the same time, which would be around 1993, 94. So the radio show was No Beat Radio on CIUT, and it's still going with one of the co-founders and my high school friend, Manesh Mandota. And Teresina also had a show for many years on that same station. So that's Toronto's university station. I think it might be the third strongest in signal in North America. I don't know if that's still true. So it's actually a pretty good thing. And we just started up a show in WFMU as well and did our debut last week. So for me, radio's always been part of it.
And you studied it. You went to school for broadcasting.
Yeah, study loosely. Wow. Yeah, I went to radio and television arts at Ryerson, and it didn't. The television I wasn't interested in really, but anything that was music related, I was. So for sure, I studied it. And the last year of that project, my friend and I, Jason Ann, made friends with him there, and we just did audio recording session, and I think we recorded someone too during that time, maybe a couple of people, but we did our own project. Now he does suction records. He calls himself Solvent. People in the kind of IDM world, I guess.
It's minimal synth, IDM, electro, for sure.
Yeah, that's true. More so minimal synth. Yeah. So he does great stuff all over the place. So anyway, my first band was Parts Unknown, and that went for about 8 years, and we played a lot in the city and only a couple of times outside. And then around 2000, formed the Creeping Nobodies, and we played extensively through Canada, into the States, into Europe once, and then I left the band around the last year of its existence, and they went to Europe again. So had a lot of great experiences, but all while working full-time, doing the radio show and everything else. So it was a hectic thing. We would kind of stay up.
Life. I was talking to Babs about this before we came on air, and it's, you know, a lot of people in the music industry have got their job and their life, which is their sort of normal life in inverted commas, and then it's your creative side, and you need both to sort of need one to do the other, and vice versa. And it's it is interesting that, you know, we have to have something else. You know, you have to be very successful to be able to make it completely from creating music or bands or radio shows or anything like that. So
or 100% committed. I think there are people who throw themselves into it and don't have the success, but find a way to do it. And I think I was always been scared to make that step. So.
It's a big jump. It's a huge jump, isn't it?
We only managed for about 3 years. I would say from 2004 to 2007 was a sort of golden period where we were making money pretty much solely based on our work, musical work. But that was as well too. Like, you know, we were talking about diversification. We were doing remixes. We were doing production work for other people. I was DJing on the side. You know, and I think that's kind of how you have to do things these days. It's it is, you know. So.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to wrap up really quickly, because being project based, I just want to say our newest thing is doing psychic weapons. And we've got
so we're in a band together now. I swear I would never do it again, but he convinced me. I was always like, "Don't shit where you eat. Don't shit where you eat." And he's like, "You got to."
You've also got a new radio show, haven't you? You just launched your new radio.
Yeah, we were very fortunate. And again, one of the, you know, I know we'll talk about the pandemic and the experience, but. I know the pandemic was really hard for a lot of people, and we were very fortunate that we had the opportunity to connect with many, many DJs from all over the world. I mean, I know Teresina was doing tons of amazing live streams, and we all were streaming and coming in contact with people that, and like yourselves, like the 45 Kings, I found you guys, you know, and so a really amazing gal named DJ Georgie Girl, sort of, we befriended each other, and she was like, "I really like what you do," and she's a WFMU DJ, gifted. I mean, she makes like tone poems. Like she does compiles like library music together and edits together, and then does readings over it. She's phenomenally talented. And she said, "You guys should get a show." And we were like, "No, not that good." And she's like, "Yeah, you are." And I was like, let's just try it. And they listened to some of my on my live streams and mixtapes that I'd made, and they were like, "Yeah, come on board." So we just did our first show last week, and it was amazing fun, and we'll be doing it weekly. So it's nice to have that regular schedule.
Yeah, that definitely helps in these sort of uncertain times, and you know, it's just having something to sort of focus on each week or each month or whatever it is, you know. So that's fine. Cool. I'm going to bring Teresina back in. Obviously, we've just spoken about a little bit about the pandemic and that. I mean, tell us, what were you doing sort of immediately before COVID on a music? Like, you know, I assume like most people, it just sort of stopped. And then what did you do to sort of keep your creative side going, and how did you deal with that? How was it? You know, how did it affect your mental health and, you know, any other aspect of your life? A lot of questions.
Okay, I'll start with one of them. So I'm an anxious person, so I have anxiety and panic attacks. And I've always had them since I was a child, probably about 7 or 8 years old. So, the pandemic was huge for me, as well as everybody else. But luckily, I've had stable work. And I work in the education industry, so as a graphic designer. So luckily, my job was stable throughout, and I have an employer that is amazing in terms of offering support for staff. So yeah, when the pandemic hit, it was just like none of us thought that it would last very long, but
No.
it's been a year and a half. So yeah, my first thing was, okay, safety, health, survival, access to food. It was just this okay, what do you do? What if the power goes out? What if you don't have food? How do you, it was just this, what the heck do you do to survive if we don't have the things that we're used to living? So it was just a huge shock. So I wasn't thinking about creativity then. It was more just, okay, can I see my mom? Can I see, who can I have access to? And living on my own, I didn't have a partner or anybody to sort of talk to and help me get through it outside of my family and just technology. So thank God for technology that got us through. Once things started to ease up and we started to adjust our thoughts as to how to function, how to survive, what's actually going on, getting our minds around all that. I continued to do my DJ party. It was just once a month before the pandemic. And every once in a while, I'd just do mixes for Mixcloud, and occasional radio guest spots kind of thing for, at the time it was the Rock and Soul Ichiban on WFMU, but the person that was leading that live stream has gone on to do something called Boss Radio 66. So right. I would do stuff for them occasionally every couple of months. But yeah, with my monthly, I was just taking the lead from other friends. Like we found out about Twitch, that was an option to stream live, and I've moved on to Mixcloud as my streaming service. But yeah, it was just like friends we needed to stay connected. So we all talked to each other. We all helped each other in terms of technically how to set ourselves up. So I literally grabbed a mixer that my dad had given me from the 80s that I've had ever since he gave it to me, which was literally like a wood box, and it had the UV level. I grabbed that from storage, and I was just like, okay, this is going to be enough. A microphone that he had given me as well, and just set myself up with my 2 turntables, and on my laptop, just got the cables that I needed to, and started using Twitch for a couple of months, and then moved over to Mixcloud. Invested in a mixer eventually, and a better microphone, and I started to do some radio programs for Soho Radio. Monolocal Mixtape is the program, and that was all through friends too, of suggesting, hey, what's do you want to do some shows for them? They're looking for people to like, it was my friend Java Jones, who's Juanita, who's on the chat. So she's the one that suggested if I wanted to do, knowing my background in radio, having been a volunteer for many years, almost a decade at CIUT, which is University of Toronto's radio station, as Derek mentioned. So yeah, that was my way of surviving, is just needing to still do the monthly radio gig. Not radio gig, my monthly DJ night with it. So 60s soul, just keeping that going, and supporting friends throughout. I haven't really been collecting music. I started to buy records from friends online who have been meeting through these chats and through these live streams. So lots of stuff that I probably purchased about 10 to 12 records, and I've never done that. I'm the travel, go to another city, buy records, or find what I can find in Toronto. So in the wild, as they say, I generally like to buy things because it's a part of the experience of buying music, is the people you meet, the places you go to. Yeah, so I can tell you a story about the record that I bought. Oh yeah, I got that in New York, and when I went to the WFMU record fair in whatever. Like I love all of that connected to. So I'm not a Discogs click a button and now I have a record collection. I'm the been doing this for 25 years.
The original. It's interesting because it has moved on, isn't it? Because there's a place for all of it, isn't there? I get exactly what you're saying, and I think certainly I was doing a lot of that before the pandemic. But as soon as the pandemic hit and all these shops were shut, you're just like, well, you just have no choice, and it's push online. It's interesting what you were saying about you ended up buying from other friends rather than sort of jumping onto Discogs. So yeah, and again, that's that friendship, isn't it? It's that friendship bond that you're building.
The community,
yeah, definitely. It's all about the community. Yeah,
and it feels like it's a stronger community, even though I have a strong, like we, even with Babs and I and a few of us here in Toronto, we have a strong friendship with friends in Singapore and our friend who's now moved to Japan. I talk to her every day. And with Java Jones, like I talk to her basically every day, and we mentor each other, we help each other, we talk about community. It's just the community is now huge. Now we're across the ocean. We always were, but it's just that much more intense, where we're just like, I love you. I can say to my, love you, miss you. I can say that to people who I've actually never even met in person yet. So
it's and I think it's still this I don't know what's going on in Canada in terms of travel, but certainly in the UK, it's very difficult to go anywhere or people to come here. I mean, I had one of my friends from DJ on here was in Germany. He was saying, oh, I'm thinking of coming over. Can I come over for a few days and see him? We're like, okay, let's look at some dates. And I was like, okay, well, these days. I said, hold on a second. Well, what about COVID? What can you get into the country first of all, and what do you need to do? And then he suddenly looked it up and said, oh, right, yeah, well, I've got to quarantine, and then I've got to pay this test and that test, and it suddenly becomes really difficult. And I think that's pushed us again on to being online and having these chats on Messenger or live streams or whatever. So we're all very close, but we're still that too far away. And hopefully that will change. Maybe it probably won't be till next year, I don't think, but hopefully next year when we can all start traveling again, we can actually start meeting up. And I've got plans, and hopefully one day we'll get to Canada or you'll get to the UK or whatever. But it's really helped having this online community and people that you don't know that well who are friends. I definitely class everyone I speak to now as friends, and like you say, anyone can pick up a message and go from there.
And technology has made that happen for us. Like, through this pandemic, if we didn't have, I think in terms of mental health, if we didn't have the technology, we would be way worse, because there's nothing like touch and hugging friends. Like, that's the thing with us now is we actually can go out, but the first thing we're doing is hugging friends and like being able to like, oh wow, I can have contact with people safely. But yeah, thank God for technology, because we would not have gotten through this.
Well, it's like you said earlier about if you're not going to have electric, if you're not going to have food, imagine if the internet had just disappeared. It would have been, I don't know how any of us would have coped at that stage. Especially if we're locked down and you're relying on information from the government or whatever. But got a couple of comments in here. So again, Bella Doom, live streams helped us keep connected and happier. And DJ Morticia, the pandemic has really pushed community growth online. Will be great to meet everyone one day. That's cool. Right. Babs, let's come back to you. We spoke a little bit about areas you might want to sort of talk about. One of them you mentioned was sort of PTSD. Do you want to talk about that? When that sort of came about in your life, and not that you deal with it, or how you did deal with it, or.
I'm gonna I'll paraphrase. I'll tell the story as quickly as I can, and I'll just echo everything that Teresina said. About connectivity and DJing, and also too just the value of music and how important music was. And I think we all kind of at first were like, "Oh shit, is there enough food? Is there enough? People are dying. We're not going to see people we love. Does the world really need a DJ?" I grappled with that, and the answer was resoundingly yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we needed these safe spaces for people to connect and not feel lonely. And I think that was a huge thing in bringing people together. In terms of mental health, I would definitely say that my experience has been a very exceptional one. It took me a long time to understand that my life has not been like other people's lives for a few reasons. When Lady Melza and Sucker Punch did their show, a lot of their stories resonated with me.
Yeah.
I knew at the age of 5, very early on, that there was something very wrong with my family and with my parents' marriage. That was the first time my mom left my dad. And my dad essentially had a very serious problem with alcohol.
Right.
And he was not a nice drunk. He was a nice guy when he wasn't drinking, but when he was, which unfortunately is every day, he would become quite violent and verbally abusive. And it was very, very challenging. There were many nights where we'd always know what kind of night we were having when I came home from school as to what direction or angle the car was parked on in the driveway.
Right.
Because we'd know, and he'd come home and he would drink more, and then he would pass out. And then what would happen is at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, he would wake up and kind of go on a rampage. And I developed very instinctively a very protective nature. And anyone who knows me, like, I'm like a mama bear. I'm just like, I will go in, I will fight, I will stand up for people. I don't like bullies, you know, and I'm a very protective kind of person. And a lot of that was centered around protecting my mom and my brother. And we actually had a system where my mom would sleep in the bed with me, and she would sleep on the inside and I would sleep on the outside, so that when my dad would kind of go on a tear, he would grab me by the arm and pull me out of bed and kind of shake me around a bit. And that would give my mom time to run out behind him, grab my brother, and then I would disengage from my dad, and we would run out to the car, and we would either sleep in the car or we would sleep at my mom's place. So, you know, safety and security there was always a really big issue. And that went on for quite some time. And finally, when a lot of it, my brother's 8 years younger than me, and so a lot of my experience too is centered around protecting my brother and protecting him, because that was safety for me. Very luckily, and then something else happened in between there, in all of that. So, you know, I mean, it was really tough because I think my mom, you realize too that trauma is generational. And now growing up, and this was something that Sucker Punch said, is that I understand my mom's experience, her childhood experience, and things that happened generations ago have long-term effects. And she also came from a very sort of harrowing abuse experience. And so she is the way she is because of very specific things. And I think because her marriage and things were so difficult, what she tried to do is she tried to control things with her appearance and with her body. And so food became a really big thing. I was on my first diet because I was and it's weird kind of looking back at the photos of me as a young child, because I'm a chunky kid, but I wasn't like I wasn't an obese child. I was just a solid child. But I was put on my first diet when I was 7. I was taken to Weight Watcher, not Weight Watcher. I was on Weight Watchers, but my mom took me to a dietitian. And still to this day, I remember like the blue of the carpet and like this nice lady who actually wasn't that nice, and the sound of like this old school scale and like the chunk of the weight on the scale, and my mom making me pan fry. Like to this day, I can't stand the smell of cooking spray. It makes me retch because I used to have to eat egg whites with cooking spray. And it was funny because I think it was my mom trying to gain control over her life, trying to gain, and also too, I felt, and again, that feeling of inadequacy. I was a fat kid. I wasn't worthy. I wasn't special. I wasn't, and so music for me ended up being kind of the savior, because that was the one thing that kind of made me special. And it didn't matter if I was chubby because I had this talent and then something else happened when I was 13, and in Canada, it's a big thing, and it's kind of a rite of passage for every student that when you are in grade 7, you go on this thing called the Quebec Trip. And basically your French class loads into a bus and we all drive to Quebec, and we all go to Montreal or we go to Quebec City. And you tour buildings and you go and you eat poutine and, you do the thing, and it's like this big history lesson.
How old's grade 7? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Part of that was a visit to the Quebec National Assembly. And this was in 1984. And it just so happened that my school trip was there on a day where a gentleman, he was a former military service. He was in the Army, and he had a mental breakdown, and he stormed the building armed with 2 machine guns. He killed 3 people that day. And my class was essentially taken hostage that day. And I remember standing in the hallway because my friend had to go to the bathroom, and we were separated from our class, and seeing this man running by me. And he looked like Rambo. Like when people asked me later, I was like, oh yeah, he looked like Rambo. And hearing this like pop, 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 pop. And like, we thought that it was some demonstration of like, 1812 guns or something. And then realizing that no, something's not right. And, I remember kind of running carefully to the main foyer. And one of his victims was there, and she did not make it, and hiding under the stairs. And then I remember behind us, this door opening, and literally by the scruff of my neck, this like secret panel door, someone kind of pulls us into the room, and that was where the rest of our class were. And I don't know how long we were there. It feels like time stops, right?
Yeah.
And hiding under chairs, but being able to hear him firing guns and yelling and all that. And after God knows how long, I just remember the door like boof getting kicked in, and then these like army dudes in like full on tactical gear, and basically they were like, out, run, and then they just got us the hell out of there. And like they took us down into these series of like this series of tunnels underneath the building, and they're just like behind us going run, and we're all just like, whoa, okay, we're running, like it seems so surreal and like it was out of a movie. And then walking up these like metal stairs, and we came out a hatch, and we were in this field, like literally like a mile away from the building. So they'd gotten us out. The weird thing about that is that this was in 1984, and nobody talked about PTSD. Nobody talked about gun violence. Nobody talked about what the after effects were of experiencing something like that. And I also suspect too that the school board did not want to get into trouble with any parents. And so this entire event was very much swept under the rug. Nobody talks about it. Nobody ever knows that there were 30 children who were the age of 12. And it, the funny thing is that for the longest time, and I think what I do with a lot of my issues was that I compartmentalize things for a very long time. And it almost became like this, like I've just told you now, like it's like a cool story to tell at parties, and like, oh, I lived through this, and yeah, it was a thing, and yeah, it was surreal, and yeah, it was cool, and like whatever. So I kind of filed that away in the back of my mind for a very long time, of what I experienced. Life goes on, I kind of go through again, like I described before, there were feelings of inadequacy. There were feelings of, I struggled with an eating disorder in my early 30s. At one point, I weighed probably about 105 pounds. I was sick. Everybody at the time kept telling me, my God, you've never been more beautiful. You look stunning. You look beautiful. And on the inside, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was worthless. And dealing with my father also too, very suddenly passed away. He died of a massive heart attack at 49. And my last words to him were very unkind. Because as I grew up and I grew strong, I was like, I don't need you, and he was very awful. We worried about our safety during the time after my parents separated, quite a bit. And when we separated, he vowed never, like, I remember him calling me on my birthday and being like, your mother, you and your fucking bitch, you're never going to get a dime of child support. Fuck you. That was like my birthday. But I mean, these are things that I kind of came to expect from him. And because my mom was a single parent, she worked with, for the government, and she worked with developmentally delayed individuals. And because we were so broke, she worked full-time for the government, and then we became a foster treatment home because that was her specialty. And so we had 2 children to start with who had severe developmental delays. And basically it was my job and my role in the family to help my mom, help us survive, help us have jobs, and it was kind of tough, new kid in a new town, small town, single mom. And, you want to have friends come over, and we don't live in the progressive time where we are now, where people are more accepting of these things. It was kind of hard, finding friends and being like, oh, well, why do you have this, developmentally delayed person living in your house, like, and like changing adult diapers at the age of 15, because that's what one did. I didn't know any different. That was my responsibility. And one of the outcomes of it is that the good thing is that it taught me compassion. It taught me care. Yeah. It taught me to be grateful and happy for the privileges that I have. But also too, what happened is that my brother and I have a little saying that we're like raised by wolves, because my mom was so wrapped up in, I think, just keeping a roof over our head, keeping, and it tied into this was taking care of other children. So after the trauma of my parents splitting and all of that, my brother and I still were never quite the focus, because we were strong, we were okay. And that started a trend for me of walking it off. Just walk it off, compartmentalize. You can do this. Everything's fine. Just keep going. You're strong. Everything is okay. Everything's great. And it was, to a certain point, probably until I turned 40. And things started changing. And I started really thinking about my experience, trying to understand who I was, where I came from, knowing that my upbringing was quite exceptional, not like anybody else's, and feeling angry. Like I was angry and I was tired. And I think it was because visibility for me is really hard. No one told inner child, small Babs, hey, you know what you went through was terrible.
Yeah.
This was awful. How are you? Are you okay? No one ever asked me that. And I didn't know how to articulate asking for that help. And that was very difficult. And I struggled a lot with it. And I tried to compensate, and music did a good job of it for a while, but I couldn't in the end. And eventually, after meeting Derek, I kind of realized, hey, you know what? I need to talk to someone. I need some help. I need to talk to someone. And so I was very naive about it. I didn't really know what to do. And so I went to my doctor, and my doctor was like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll set you up with an appointment, whatever. And it was in October. I had to wait 6 months to talk to this specialist. And I thought I was just going to talk to a therapist. As it turned out, this person was a psychiatrist. I did not know that. And it just so happened, because the appointment had been scheduled for so long in advance, I'd just taken a new job, and literally my CEO was like, I'm flying in. I'm going to set this meeting for 11 o'clock on this day. Can you make it? And I was like, oh, fuck. This is like an hour and a half after my appointment with my therapist person. So I managed. So, I go in, I talk to this person, this therapist who reveals herself as a psychiatrist. And I even couched it. And I said, listen, I'm going to tell you some things that I know seem exceptional. I've been very fortunate to lead a very exceptional life. I've played in bands, I've toured around, I've made music. I have friends who are, very successful. I work in an industry that is kind of unusual. I work in the medical cannabis industry. So, I said, my life is a little weird. And I said, I'm going to tell you everything and be honest. Yeah. Because if I'm not honest in this process, you're not going to be able to help me.
No, exactly.
And I think the problem is that she just couldn't understand that my experience was, she didn't come from a background where this would be normal. And so I did my talk, and she looked at me and she sat back, and she was like, after half an hour, mind you, she said, here's what I think. She's like, I think that you have delusions of grandeur. She said, I think that you're bipolar. She said, I think that what you're telling me isn't actually real. She said, here's what I think. I think that you need to start on lithium immediately. If you want to have any further support from me, you will have to start taking this medication right now. And that's the choice you have.
Wow.
And what I wanted was to be seen and to be validated and have my experience validated. Yeah. What I got was the complete opposite. And it broke me. That broke me, and I was terrified, and it had a devastating effect on our relationship, because I came out of there reeling and actually questioning myself, being like, I was utterly and completely gaslit. And like, maybe I read all this wrong. Maybe all of this didn't happen. Maybe I wasn't in a shooting. Maybe my dad wasn't as bad as he was. Maybe, all of this. And it was terrifying, and it was frightening. And I think I was paralyzed, and I didn't know what to do. And I ran through a really bad time. And it led to the point actually where we separated for about 8 months, 6 months. And that was very, very difficult time. Probably one of the most difficult times of my life. Being without Derek.
And to be clear, the argument between us is that I'm bipolar. And with her diagnoses, which I didn't understand was a misdiagnosis, or I was suspicious of, I said I couldn't be with someone who's not medicated, because that's something that I have to be. So
yeah. And my whole thing was like, I was like, but lady, I was like, I live with someone who's bipolar. I was like, I don't think, and so I find because I don't think I don't know, you know. And so when
you're questioning yourself, that's the problem. You've got this professional in front of you telling you that what you're thinking or feeling or is not right.
Experience, like what I actually experienced wasn't real. So as part of because I was then at that point dealing with grief. I mean, never mind all of the other shit that was it was the grief of having lost my partner, the love of my life, the one relationship where I finally felt seen, valued, loved in every way was gone. And so I found a therapist. I found a therapist. Therapist shopping. And I found an amazing therapist. Her name is Olga. She is a musician. She went to the university at the same time I did. She was a cellist. So she really understood the musical mind, the creative mind. And she came in and she was like, I see you. I hear you. I believe you. Let's talk. And to this day, 4 years now on, I see Olga every week, once a week. Some weeks are good, some weeks are bad. And she has been unbelievable in helping me find myself, come to peace with my experiences, not compartmentalizing anymore. When I have anxiety, when I have issues, I talk with her about it. And it is a wonderful experience for me. Therapy has saved my life.
Yeah. I mean, it also shows how strong you are, because if you had been a weaker person, you know, you may have just listened to that first therapist and said, okay, well, you're the professional, you know what you're doing, put me on lithium. And then, you know, who knows what would have happened from there. But the fact that you knew yourself well enough to be able to say, you know, this isn't right, you've got it wrong. You know, I'm going to go and get a second, better opinion, which is what happened. But I'm sure there's lots of people out there who would have just accepted whatever that psychiatrist, therapist, whatever she calls herself, would have said and just got on with the medication. And that's quite a scary thought, really.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting and what and it's funny because I don't blame her. And I actually think that it was very much a cultural disconnect. Right. I think that this woman probably is very good at what she does, but I don't think understood a culture where women can go and play in rock bands and tour all over the place and survive abuse and be part of a mass shooting and be like, you know, it was, you know, I think there was just like some disconnect. But it's funny because it's funny that you mentioned how strong you are, because it is one thing that I love hearing and it is one thing that I know, but also too with that comes a lot of resentment, because I've often found, and one of the things that I struggled with in my anger was that, again, for me, there's always, and again, this is where the tension and anxiety lies. I'm always held to a higher standard. I'm not allowed to crack. I'm not allowed to be upset. I'm not allowed to feel pain. I'm not allowed to, because I have to hold it together. And I have found sometimes that I have been envious and perhaps resentful of other people who can just succumb, like either to the madness or to the weakness. And for those who have, you know, parental units who can sort of pick up the pieces, or, you know, that was really hard for me because I've always felt very alone in that I don't have that. I never had that. So there wasn't really a choice for me. There's never a choice. I always have to keep going. And again, this is where in therapy for me, that's that place where I go to. I can feel all of the feelings. I can say all the things. I can feel weak. I can feel vulnerable. I can be that kid who's hiding from their dad. You know, I can be that person who feels left behind by all of their friends. I can be that person who feels inadequate, and it's okay. You know, I can work through it. Yeah. And that space is essential.
And I'm so very sorry. I'm going to jump in just really quickly, just to say that her first diagnosis was a misdiagnosis, as was mine. Okay. And I think another reason for our fallout was that we knew that we had to get a second diagnosis, but you had put it off. And I know through my experiences, once you get a misdiagnosis, you're just, you don't trust in the system anymore. No. Like, I've gone through this thing and now I'm told the wrong information that I know is wrong. And it undercuts the value of having an intervention or having someone looking after you.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to be that strong and also be open to therapy. That's a very, very, like, I think that can be rare. And I think there's people out there that suffer from that, where there's a suspicion that's inbuilt with everything that rings untrue, that undermines the whole thing. So.
Well, it's a big step, isn't it? I think going in and talking to someone about anything about your life, it's that whole vulnerability, isn't it? Opening up and giving someone like you did, telling them your entire life, and then almost being batted away is like, oh well, none of that matters. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Derek, we'll come back to you in a little bit because you're bipolar. I'd be interested to talk a little bit about that. But thanks, Babs. That's amazing to hear, and I'm glad that you found Olga and that she's helping you. It's could have been very different, and Teresina, you mentioned about anxiety. We've talked about anxiety on the show before. How does it manifest for you, and what do you do to deal with it, or what advice, if you have got advice for anyone who is anxious?
Well, Babs and I have we've been friends for quite some years, but I remember when all of that was happening with her, and I tried to support her through as best as I could. And we have a lot of parallels in our lives. Fathers who drank, parents who weren't focused on supporting our emotional needs. So, there's a lot of stuff that happened to me that were very similar to, not as much trauma as Babs had experienced, but still traumatic. For me, anxiety started, I was always a very chatty kid who was always enthusiastic and always asked questions and, loved school and wanted to talk about everything that I learned. And I was always told to just, you're talking too much at the dinner table. And, you're right. Just shut up. You're like a machine. You've got like a crank in your back. Can you just be quiet? And being the youngest and the daughter in the family, there was a lot growing up in a Portuguese, very traditional Roman Catholic family. Women were always the ones to be more quiet. We were the last to be served dinner. We were the ones cleaning up. We were the ones, making everyone's bed in the family. And it's growing up in Canada, I always knew that this wasn't right and I didn't like it. And I always tried to push for things that I wanted and things that I was passionate about. So I've had that struggle in me all my life of like, when I want something, I work towards it. I work hard and I try to be kind. But anxiety has always been a piece of that with me. So I think everything started that I could understand when I was about 8 years old. So my trauma was a childhood friend who passed away from a heart attack at 8. Wow. So I had been playing, my parents, we went over to this family's house and I had played with him, and that week he had died. And from this, I guess they didn't know he had heart problems. And my parents took me to his funeral and his visitation. And I wasn't ready as an 8-year-old child, but growing up there, you need to take them, they need to face these things. You need to, push them into knowing and growing up and understanding how to deal with things. But I had nothing to process any of that. So, so growing up, anytime I was pushed or forced into doing something I didn't want to do, I'd have anxiety or panic attacks, like the shakes and dry mouth and racing thoughts. So it's something that I continue in adulthood. I mean, I'm 47 now, and I'm still working through it. So there's things that I love doing that create anxiety for me. Radio, as a child going in high school, I wanted to be part of the theater group. I played the cello in the orchestra for years, but every time I needed to do something or wanted to do something, it was a fight with my parents of, I want to do this. no, you have to be at home. We need to know you're safe. We need to know you're okay. A very controlling environment that just triggered my anxiety over and over again. So even DJing, DJing once a month, I absolutely love it. But, I'd organize myself to go and do this gig that I've been doing for 8 years. And those first couple of years, it was anxiety every single time of like, what if I don't feel well? What if I have to cancel? What if what if I disappoint people? What if there's not enough people going? Yeah. All these things. So for me, I knew I needed to deal with anxiety at some point. At university, there was one year that both my parents were going through health issues. My mom was diagnosed with petit mal, like partial seizures, epileptic seizures. And my dad had started, he had found out that he had prostate cancer. So that was in 2000. So I was the advocate for my parents for their health, like Babs, just stepping in and being the adult and helping them with the language barrier, speaking, like my both parents speak Portuguese, speak English well, but not enough to understand what's being explained to them. So I was very supportive of them going through their health issues. So year at university, I ended up failing I failed one course, but did really poorly. And I talked to my doctor because I was feeling really anxious, and she did put me on anxiety medication for about 6 months. Look, I didn't want to stay on it because I don't know if it's a European stubbornness of like, just deal with it. You just deal with it. You just get through it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't at that time, and I've ignored that for many years. And then when my dad's cancer diagnosis was terminal, that was when I was like, okay, I need to do something about my anxiety and my panic attacks. Luckily, it didn't affect my day-to-day life. Like I didn't stay home crying and, not get out of bed. It wasn't at that level, but it was enough that my heart palpitations, all the things that were happening, and panic attacks and racing thoughts and just exhaustion. So I went and started seeking help, and I did find a person. Her specialty is anxiety, as well as family and relationships. So yeah, I've been seeing her for about 5 years. So it was about a year before my dad passed away where I was like, I need to do something because I know he's going to die. And I know I may not be able to handle this, so I need the help. So yeah, it takes a lot of strength to come to that realization of like, I can't do this on my own. I need somebody to talk to. So that was so very helpful to have support and to be able to. And I feel so privileged and appreciative that because of my workplace, because of the medical system in Canada, like I had options to get support and get help. And being a white female in Canada helped very much that I had access because of the work that I do in the country that I live in. So thankful that I was able to get that help. So, and be able to ask, and even like this is something that I talk to my brother a lot about, is just understanding that you are a complex person and that you can ask for help. You can change. You can do something to help yourself so that your life is better, and the people that you surround yourself with, you're supportive to them, and they can help you get through as well. So, yeah.
I think it's the time we live in as well. I mean, it's definitely opening up, and it obviously we'll never know, but obviously, if our parents, your parents, had access to therapy and help back then 20, 30, 40 years ago, you just don't know. And hopefully now that society is opening up and we are talking, I mean, even just what we're doing today, will have some impact on future generations further down the line, so that they don't have as much trauma, hopefully. I don't know, but hopefully they won't. And it's amazing that society is opening up in many areas, including mental health, and including talking about this and getting access to the help that, I think we all need it. It's good to talk, even if you haven't got any major issues, it's good to talk to someone else just to sort of try and work out where you are and be able to sort of get on with life, which is very difficult. You know?
And one word that comes up very often in therapy, as well as just in general, and speaking with my friends and my circle of support, is compassion. I've looked into. Like, I grew up Roman Catholic, but looking into Buddhism and meditation and understanding, how you take in the world and being in the now and understanding, trying to understand another person's experience and just being gentle with yourself and with other people. It's been a journey. It's so cheesy to say it's a journey, but it has been a journey of like who I am, what I mean in this community of people, and how we can, and especially people who are involved in music and creativity, we're just that much more sensitive that we feel each other's pain, we feel each other's joys too, and supporting each other. So it's so very important. Compassion is such a huge part of that.
Yeah. So, but it is you're right. It is a journey. I know it's cheesy, but everything that happens is part, and hence the name of the show. It is part of my journey. Everyone I meet, everyone I do, it's all part of it, and it's the same for all of us. Everyone you meet has an impact in some way on your life and how things progress. So, right, we'll come back to Derek now. So Derek, you've touched on obviously your diagnosis of bipolar. If you're happy to, can you tell us, when you first got diagnosed, how it impacts, and I understand that music has been quite a big help in that.
Oh, for sure. I'd love to talk about. How are you for time, by the way? Just
we've got a bit of time. We can probably. It depends how long you want to talk. I think we've probably got about another hour max.
Oh, all right.
I'm going to do another stream for something else, but that's 6:45 UK time. So yeah, we've got about another hour.
Okay, well, I'll talk.
We've got a couple 25s and some tweets to talk about. So yeah, we've got a bit of time.
So my diagnosis is bipolar 1, which there's, I guess, 2. One is kind of more rapid cycling and a lot more of a roller coaster, and I would imagine much harder to deal with. Mine takes longer form, and you don't even know. Some people just have one episode and that's it. Some have a couple or a few. I've had a few, and they... It's a longer cycle, but being bipolar or manic depressive as it used to be, if you're a custodial engineer, you're still a janitor. I'm still manic depressive, bipolar, whatever you want to call it. Term doesn't really make a difference to me, but anyway. For me, my first diagnosis was when I was 22, and before mania is hypermania. So you get all the excited speech, lots of quick connecting ideas, and you start being edgy and kind of pushy in a way, and excited but excitable. So that was going on, and my friends didn't quite know what was going on, though they knew something was going on. And I think it's hard for people to know when is a point where it's concerning and when it's not. And in hypermania, you can actually maintain that and then get back out. And, who doesn't want to have lots of great ideas and be flying about, and it's great for a while. And it is a bit of an intoxication. You just love that state. So I think that's one of the challenges in mania, because the other is the bipolar being down low depression. I've had that too. And so every time you get out of a depression and are into either a normal state or even better, you're feeling great, then you don't want to give that up. So the hypermania is hard. But in the first encounter with it, I didn't know what was going on, except that I thought this was the best time ever. Except that it just kept on escalating and escalating. There'd be shouting matches. I'd be very bizarre. So my first hospitalization, where finally there was an intervention was when I ended up in a downtown laundromat, taking off all my clothes, into different places, and then trying to fit myself into a dryer and see if I could spin it somehow, while everyone was in the laundromat. Just kind of, the police ended up being called. Let's just put it that way. And they tried to get me out, and I said, "It's all right. I already separated my whites." And they looked very, very annoyed by this. They said, "Come out," and they had no more patience. And I was like, "Why don't you come in and get me, big boy?" And then that was kind of like my first run-in with police taking me to a hospital. So I was misdiagnosed, as I said, the first time. And I think it was an Austrian woman who was like, "Street drugs, he's on street drugs." And she just kept on shouting that I was on street drugs, which I knew I wasn't, So that's why I talked about that suspicion of it. And I switched to another psychiatrist who I have to this day. And, they just monitor medicine. So that's probably, they have to diagnose and give you medicine, but they don't do the psychology behind it. They don't help you navigate your journey. They do to a degree, but but he is great, and he got the right diagnoses, and he got me on lithium very quickly, which I think the high to the low in and of itself, and being medicated is, devastating when it's the first time.
Right.
But I think my system also did not do well with lithium. I just felt like I was carrying around sandbags all the time. I'm not great with wanting to sleep lots at the best of times. And then it was just, this just made me drag through every day. And it was the medication being heavy in my system, I think, maybe coupled with the depression, which is harder to tell. So, it really kind of threw me and, derailed my life. I was already making music at that time. Or no, maybe I wasn't even. I don't know. 22. Yeah, I was. And it kind of you kind of, after something like that, you say a lot of things you regret and act in a lot of ways that, I reflect on. I'm still like, that was amazing, but it's not, and it's weird because it still feels like it's you. And I think a lot of people know a lot of what came out was part of you too, maybe that you're holding in, not dealing with. So you kind of have a whole minefield to unravel. And you have to have others trust you, and you have to trust yourself. And I think that's the hardest thing. I'm sorry, I'll get upset because, I do. But then when you put it back together, it feels like it didn't happen in a way. Like you just go back to being normal, as normal as I am, and live a life, and it's fine. You've got a job, you do your things, people start trusting you again, they understand something went on. And eventually I was insistent that I wanted to go off medication.
Yeah.
Which, almost everyone is at the beginning, and probably would prefer to be, anyway. Yeah. And my doctor, he said, sometimes people just have one episode. If you really want to do this, we'll wean it down, and, I allow it. And here's, kind of the ways to best navigate, and we'll see what happens. And very quickly, within a year, I had a much more intense, and I'd say darker kind of reoccurrence. And it actually scared me a bit, because now it wasn't as much fun. It's like, where am I going? So then I kind of realized, and I think one of the interesting things of actually being in a hospital and kept until you get a medication, get out, and are like, well, you're not a danger to yourself or society, which is how you get there in the first place. It forces you to listen to people and do the therapy and take the medication, and you're still kind of left to sort it out. But I think it makes it easier to start that journey. But I also really resented it. both times.
Yeah.
And the second time, it was just the same thing. You have to rebuild. You kind of lose a year. You don't know what's going on. Kind of like a pandemic. Like what happens in a pandemic is almost like what happens in bipolar, because it's like, oh, well, there went a year. Like I'm depressed. I'm weird. People don't know what's going on. Socialization is weird. And then I was great for about 8 years, and sorry, it's a little bit, I don't talk about it tons in detail, but everyone was a great support, and I think that was a big thing. And I think having supportive friends and a supportive network, from my experience, has really, really made a difference in how I'm able to function. And like Teresina said, a supportive work environment. I work in a hospital, coincidentally, and of course the hospital programs are fantastic for support, for giving people time off. I've had a number of times where I've had to take time off for work, and it's been great. Invariably, I was in that band touring, working, and basically I'd work full time, do the radio show. We'd practice 3 times a week. We'd write and record albums, and then we'd go and tour and try to play 50 to 100 shows a year if we could, as many as we could. And we would all work full time. On Friday night, leave, drive like crazy to make it to a first gig somewhere, go on a 2 or 3 week tour, come home on Sunday, pack all the gear, get up and go to work again. And that was kind of the cycle, which is good if you're manic depressive, and bipolar. It's like, well, I can operate at this level for a while. Yeah. But it does take its toll. And, relationships are a bit dodgier to try to navigate as well. And I was likewise in a relationship at the time when I was in that band. This is the Creeping Node Buddies period now. And kind of it all unraveled around the same time, like kind of the relationship. And a couple of years later, I felt like I couldn't do the band anymore while in Europe. And then had another episode as I was trying to sort all that out, and ended up in a hospital for the 3rd time in Amsterdam, which was also great. I think it was Amsterdam where I ended up.
Utrecht?
Utrecht. Thank you, Utrecht. And funnily enough, a great friend of mine is actually in a psychological field, and he was over there. He's Dutch, and he was able to check in on me. So again, I have this weird, very fortuitous network that has helped me even there. My brother eventually came out, brought me home, and again, that took another year to recover. And I kind of retreated from music entirely. And I got into, but not for long, got into another relationship, had another project, a duo. But this was harder to get off the ground. And I was a little more kind of shy about doing stuff. We called ourselves karaoke, so no one could find us. And, but, kept at the creativity, which I think is important for me. Eventually that relationship ended, and also it took its toll. And I didn't really have a hospitalization, but definitely things again. The big transitions in my life tend to be also very difficult for me if it doesn't work out. And so after that, I moved back in with my mom, and ended up quite depressed, and ended up eventually in a relationship that I did not like, and was removed from music. And the relationship was kind of a little bit controlling too. So never wanted me to go out, would be very kind of almost, checking in all the time, hyper vigilant with me. And I felt like something was off on that, and discussions about that just weren't really on. And then I tried to get out of it a bunch of times, but didn't, and got very isolated from my friends and whatnot. And finally just broke that relationship off, and moved back with my mom again. And then just took my time to sort out. We met, and that was amazing. But before we met, I actually ended up again on a bit of an episode. I didn't get hospitalized for because I wasn't a...
You were trying.
Yeah, because I was told to, and no one would take me because I wasn't a danger or threat. I ended up in Edmonton. I was also listed as a missing person for a while. So
it was really interesting because, I mean, I'd known Derek for a very long time. And Derek, you know, and this is something that I'm sure that you probably live with, is that I think the people, when you are a creative person and you also struggle with a mental health diagnosis, that may sometimes lead to some behavior that may be considered eccentric or erratic, all of a sudden kind of get slapped with this like torture genius label, right? And I think that's something that, I mean, I know, like, you know, when we look at how we view ourselves and how others view us, I know that, I mean, Derek, by the sheer nature of his musical amazingness, you know, that a lot of people look at Derek, and I certainly did, and understanding and kind of knowing, like, we knew, okay, you know, we know, everyone in the music scene kind of knows that Derek is bipolar, has had these experiences. Sometimes it possibly is part of the creativity, but I remember very distinctly, and I mean, I had always had a crush on Derek, and I had always very much liked him, and we would kind of cross paths in the scene and stuff. And I remember when you were sort of posting on Facebook and having that experience where you're trying to get in the hospital in Edmonton, and I wrote a message to you on your wall, and I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm here. I'm looking out for you. I'm pulling for you. I hope that you're going to get where you need. And if you need anything, like, I'm here. You know, and that was really important to me. And it was really interesting that sort of happened before we ended up really kind of, you know, starting a relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it was a unique experience because I went there very suddenly again, because of a relationship that I thought was going to be a good one, and again looked like it was going to be terrible, and ended up getting kicked out of the car and in downtown Edmonton, which is a bit of a Walking Dead scenario. Actually, it was not in good shape, and there's a lot of people that have drug dependencies, and there's a bad epidemic there. At least there was at that time. I assume it's probably the same because it didn't look like it was going to correct itself. So suddenly I was in the middle of the street, like miles away from someone who decided they'd had enough and pushed me out to prove a point. And so I just decided, okay, well, I'm not gonna let this point stand. I'm just gonna find my way around. So I would sleep on the street. I did try a shelter briefly, and that wasn't great. But I had a ticket home, and I had a supportive network, and I kind of went on a bit of a vacation, I felt.
It was like an adventure, sort of said.
And an adventure. So, I mean, I learned a lot about kind of being on your own. And I think in the back of my mind, I said this at the time, like, I don't know, like, what's going to happen in my future. It might be good to know, like, when I'm not, like, in bad shape, like, how to get a support network and not have and sleep on the street for a bit. But, you know, I also felt like I was being a bit of a tourist in a world that I really didn't have a business being in. And so, you know, like, I did try to keep myself separate and just not use services more than I needed to. But around that time I was, all while still being employed, which was amazing, with sick leave. Yeah. So, you know, like, again, it's a situation where I really had the support, and it almost felt like I shouldn't even be doing this. But it was an interesting world to live in for a short time, and see how that works. And I could see that the supports are there for people, but I could also see how it could easily be a problem where, you know, like, I understand where people that are in that situation are coming from a lot better. And, you know, again, picked things up, and things, you know, money goes when you're bipolar. If you're not careful, an episode is usually accompanied with, you know, there goes your finances, you know. So I've had to build back to a good place quite often in my life. But, you know, again, when it's not there, similar with the depression. I've had terrible depression at times, but as soon as you're out of it, it's like, you know, like, let's go, you know, want to go get something to eat, you know, let's go for records. And just suddenly just everything seems normal, and it is normal for months and years. And it stops feeling like it's a relevant experience, even though it is. So, I mean, the mental health journey is definitely an interesting one. And you know, when you get it sorted and get the right help and the right medication, I got off lithium, by the way, after the second episode, because I had a bad reaction to it, and ended up on something that's better medication for me. And then through all these kinds of cycles of breakups, and around our breakup, I also was in CAMH for a while, which is a downtown Toronto hospital. At that time it was voluntary, but again, like, I didn't really want to. Well, no, it wasn't voluntary. It was a bad one again. But again, like, I had the supports and things worked out very well for me. And I was more open as I got older to the therapy, and more open to the fact that I had to advocate for myself. And being in that situation later in life is interesting, because I could see people really fighting it. I thought to myself, you're just going to be there longer. You know, the listening to people, being open to the therapy and figuring things out actually really works out better for you than fighting it, being this is wrong and not finding that. But you do have to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
A lot, I think, to find something that works. I think there's a lot of people that are in that middle ground, and I think that's a very hard struggle. And all I can say is keep advocating and finding the thing that works best for you, medication, everything else wise. For, you know, I'm talking more so for serious things like bipolar, I think is like super aggressive in that way, in that how it affects your life. But I mean, surely anything, I'd say, you know, like any kind of mental health.
I think it's good advice for anyone, you know, for anything. And I think, you know, only you know yourself, really, and I think you've got to stand up for yourself and make sure you get what's going to work for you. Definitely. And I think sometimes you do need to, like both of you have said, you just need to keep pushing until you get the right person or the right medication or the right situation, and not sort of settle for the first thing that comes along that may not be right. So thank you. Thank you. Yeah, really interesting, and thank you for your openness, and like, you know, yeah, everyone says it about this show, and it's one of the things I love about it. People come on here and they're, you know, they're so open, and, you know, thank you for all of you sharing all your experiences. It's I say it all the time, you know, if one person watches this and gets some sort of ideas or assistance or help, then, you know, it's worth doing. It's amazing. So
100%, yeah.
Right, we're going to move on to some music. I know we're not going to play any, but we're going to move on to some 45. So I'll go back to Teresina. So this came up from I might not get to mine. Mark Lancaster was a guest, I think, on the second show, but in the first episode he asked a question, said, you know, what 45s lift the spirits. So I ask my guests now to bring 3 that have a particular connection with them or a particular thing that lifts their spirits. So what have you got for us, Teresina?
I just want to say, Derek, that was very brave. Thank you for sharing that so much. Yeah. So, you know, yeah, thank you.
It's important to talk about. So, yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, big hugs next time I see you. My favorite records change constantly. So for me, I chose 3 45s that are more recent ones. They're pandemic 45s. Actually, one of them isn't. 2 of them are. So yeah, one of my favorite tracks that I've been playing a lot recently on my live streams. I'm a huge fan of the Contours, which were one of the Motown bands that really, I mean, Do You Love Me is the one song that people talk about, but which was their really big hit. But I absolutely love many of their singles, and one of them is this particular track called "It Must Be Love." It's such a driving beat, fast paced, and it's just talking about the lyrics. just an intense expression of love. So I'm all about love. So yeah, I really, really love that song. And anytime I've played it, usually friends are like, whoa, what is this? And when I say it's the Contours, they're like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, I don't like the fact that they're one of the Motown bands that doesn't have as much recognition as they should for the amazing tunes, the output that they had. So yeah, I bought this quite a few years ago, probably, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. And I can't remember where I purchased it, but one of my top 45s that whenever I start getting into that mood of playing it, I absolutely love it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Cool.
Yeah, the other two are records that I got from friends in the UK. One is Graham, a person, I don't remember. I think he's up in the Liverpool area.
Okay.
But yeah, it's Jackie Wilson's The Hoo Hoo song. My Sweet Baby. It's such a fantastic, fast-paced. I guess it's known as a Northern Soul track. It's a soul tune that is driving with an amazing and similar. It's just about love. Yeah, lyrics are really important to me, but mostly it's just a driving beat. If it's something that moves you, and even when I DJ or generally collect, I always think about music that will play well on a dance floor and get people moving and get them inspired. So that's always been something that's been important to me. Even with doing radio, it doesn't necessarily have to be fast paced, but it's just something that draws me in, either the rhythm, the beat, certain instruments, or the voice, the lyrics, whatever it may be. There has to be something to draw me in. So yeah, the last record is a record that I bought from my friend Mark, who's also in the UK. I think he's in the Midlands. So he's a Northern Soul collector, DJ person, wonderful gentleman who a year ago he lost his daughter in a sudden passing, sudden death. So he does a lot of fundraising every once in a while for I think it's a mental health organization that he supports in the name of his daughter. So yeah, it's Lou Johnson, Unsatisfied. Another amazing track, considered Northern Soul. It's a soul tune, but just beautiful voice and lyrics, and more mid-tempo. But yeah, just longing, love. I don't know if it's the Portuguese in me with fado and folk music, but there's always something about longing and wanting and not necessarily unrequited love, which sucks. But yeah, always some kind of like wanting and expression of care and love. So those are my 3 selects.
I will have to check all of those out because I know a couple of the artists, but I don't know this particular song. But
I'll send you links.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point of this, and the amount of music I've learned and found out about is it's unbelievable. The last year or so. Thank you for those. They're great. Babs and Derek, have you gone for 3 each, or have you got 3 together?
We have 3 each, but we can do 3 together, or I can go really fast. I'm gonna go super fast. We've still
got one more segment. Yeah, I'm gonna miss out mine for this show today. But yeah, do if you want to go 6, that's cool. Oh yes.
Because again, I heard this on the radio and it changed everything. Listening to this late at night, ska, Two-Tone, you can't go wrong, and it's just so much fun. But it has that little dark part in between. Like that, the key change in that is just the same old show. Like that's a very dark, like it's like light and happy and then a little dark, but then back to light. So that, Sparks, #1 song in heaven, produced by Giorgio Moroder, great disco track. So uplifting. You can't listen to Russell Mael sing and not feel brilliant. The last one, and this is going to be a little schmoopy, David Bowie, Absolute Beginners, because Teresina, I love love. And this song is all about love through adversity. and love and the strength and the power of love. And it's my favorite love song. And I always think of this guy.
Rest in peace. So many good songs. So many good songs. Derek, have you got 3 as well?
Yeah, I do. Not so much involved with love. Sorry. But I do love them, and the artists do share love. So
you love them. There you go. There's the love connection.
Exactly. So the Clash.
Yeah.
There we go. And White Man and Hammersmith Palais is on this. My brother gave me this. Lost 1978 studio EP. But White Man in Hammersmith Palais is a song that connected with me and just went, oh, yeah, no, this is the music that is my music, which I think is great. But I don't have that single on 45 in front of me, so you're going to have to take that version. The other one is, there we go, The X. They're from Holland, and they are the best band I've ever seen, hands down. And they started in the kind of punk scene in 79 and drew straws to see who would play what, because they didn't know how to, and then ended up like politically minded, started doing covers of all kinds of different forms of music, Eastern, bringing Iranian, and starting to bring a focus into politics, and then ended up being working with a New York cellist, and then they ended up doing big band projects where it was all still scrappy and weird, but also great. And they got into Ethiopian music and did Ethiopian music with Getachew Mercuria, who's like a legend in Ethiopia, who's passed away, but they did 2 albums with him, and with a Toronto person as well, like in one of the albums. And so, but all while making their own music too. And I just, please go find them. TheX.nl. There's so much there. I love them.
Yeah,
from the Netherlands.
That sounds right up my street. I'm definitely going to check them out.
Okay, and last is Trio with Da Da Da, because I was thinking of music that makes me happy, and I'm like, I have lots of music I love, but I don't know if it makes me happy. Angry music. Oh, I love, there's some melancholy stuff, but melancholy stuff, I love it, but it doesn't make me happy. So I picked Da 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 by Trio because,
can't not be happy listening to that
just
song.
makes
Brilliant. Great selections. Thank you. And again, lots of stuff I need to check out.
I want to know yours.
I know. What are yours? Just yell them out. Okay, come on.
We'll do it quickly. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, first one is, oh no, it's not the right one. I picked up the wrong one. It's meant to be In Deep. Last night, a DJ saved my life, just because I think every time I drop it and every time you hear it, it's, well, one, it's true, but secondly, I think it's just one of those tunes that everyone knows and loves. I don't think you can be unhappy with that. Next to a bit sort of more sad, difficult ones. There's a chap on Instagram who I don't know him personally, and I've only known him through Instagram posts and things. A guy called Del Sol Condor, and he's battling mouth cancer at the moment, and it's his strength of putting it up, but it's heartbreaking, obviously, seeing how it's progressing and how he's dealing with it. But in addition to all of that, he's managed to keep together a record label, and he's released a couple of ones. The first one is Save the Wax, which is hip hop, and he's got some great people on there. It's got Greg Blackman, Genesis Elijah, Bose, DJ Money Shot from the Allergies, and that's a fundraising one. And then his latest one, which is just released, is Phil Most Chill, and again, it's got a remix of him. But it's just amazing to see what he's going through, and yet he's managing to just about keep it together to keep this. And so, if you're not following him already, Del Sol Condor on Instagram, go and show him some love. And he's had lots of people, lots of hip hop artists sort of leaving messages for him and giving him support, which is amazing. Again, it just shows the community, and he's quite blown away by understandably, by these sort of amazing artists that are getting in touch with him and saying, supporting him. And then I don't know if it quite lifts my spirit, but it's this is a track called 12-Inch Matter, Sunshine Coast. 12-Inch Matter are a hip hop band I used to manage effectively a little while ago. And Sunshine Coast is where I live, Sunshine Coast in Eastbourne, and it's about the fact that on the face of it, it's a pleasant little seaside town, and then you've got this underbelly of what's really going on and the scene, and it just means a lot because the guy, the main MC, Sluggerty, unfortunately took his life a few years ago because of issues with mental health. But it's, I listen to that and it just takes me back to that period in my life when I was hanging out with him and that. So, although it's tinged with sadness because he's not here anymore, it certainly lifts my spirit sort of listening to that. And so that's my three. Right. The last bit we do today is I like talking to people and it's great, but I do quite like this bit, is Confectionery Corner. And Teresina, I understand you've got some Canadian biscuits, I think you said.
Yes. I'm just going to pull up some information on the actual brand. So Mr. Christie is a Canadian brand of cookies, biscuits.
Right. Okay.
So it was established in 1853. So that's amazing. So they were bought out by Nabisco, and I'm not sure if Nabisco is an American brand.
I've heard of Nabisco. I think they may be, yeah.
Yeah, so that they were bought out in 1928. But Mr. Christie makes good cookies is the
right.
is the slogan. But I buy these often, and they were on sale. So double cream Oreo. I don't eat chocolate or nuts, so this has been I love buying these cookies because I can actually enjoy biscuits with my tea. So yeah, Mr. Christie's double stuffed golden Oreo cookies. So I don't know if there's an equivalent in the UK.
Well, we've got Oreos, but for some reason I always thought they were American. So are you saying that Oreos are Canadian?
Christie, the Christie brand. Yeah. So I'm not sure if Oreo cookies exist as something unto itself, but Christie is
the same sort of thing. Yeah, we have Oreos here, but I just assume they're made in America. Maybe that's just my ignorance. But we do have, there's different. There's the standard, which is the chocolate biscuit with a sort of white vanilla cream, and then obviously you've got sometimes double stuffed. But no, I haven't seen those ones, and especially in that sort of packaging. Are they big then? Are they big biscuits?
Yeah, so they're creamed biscuits.
Okay, yeah. Normally they come in a sort of tube over here.
Oh wow. Okay. So maybe Oreo is maybe part of the Nabisco brand, but Christie, I don't know the history between Oreo, but if anyone knows, or I'll look it up afterwards. But Christie is definitely a Canadian brand.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to next time I buy Oreos, I'll have a look and see what we've got on here. So.
Yeah.
Cool. And yes, DJ Blush, welcome. Oreos are pure crack, highly recommend. Yes. They definitely are. I'd certainly agree with that. Cool. Anything else, or is it just those ones? That's cool.
It. That's all I had.
Great. Okay. Babs and Derek, I think you said you got something for us.
Yes, we each have one. So I'll go quickly again. I've gone with the Vachon Granny's butter tarts. So butter tarts are a uniquely Canadian experience, and I don't understand why, because they are the greatest things ever made.
A little bit more central. I've got
here. They're, and in fact, I will open one. These are good. You can get these at any store, but the beauty of a butter tart is that it is a tart with it's a sugar butter filling that is usually quite gooey. And there's a lot of discussion as to, sometimes they have raisins, sometimes they do not. Sometimes people are very adamant, like they must have raisins, they must not. You can get these in any store. They are incredibly sweet. And it's like a butterscotch kind of, I'm going to bust this open here so you can see.
It looks
it has raisins in it. This one has raisins. So you'd be like, some have pecans.
Some not.
And there are different schools of thought as to how viscous the filling should be. Some people like them runny, some people don't. You can get maple ones. And growing up in Coburg, the town where I grew, and they have like at fairs, they have like butter tart contests as to who makes the best butter tarts. And there's a place called Betty's Butter Tarts in Port Hope, Ontario, and their butter tarts are to die for. And every time my brother and I would drive home to see our mom, we would stop off at Betty's Butter Tarts and literally buy like a half dozen and sit there and just kill this dozen of butter tarts. So I'm going to these are delightful. If you can find them, get them. They're great. Butter tart.
Cool. Can I just, Edward Bear, I think he's in Canada, isn't he? I think I'm saying to get down to Stratford. So I'm assuming that's a place in Canada.
It's a very regional thing because everybody thinks that their butter tarts are the best butter tarts. It's a thing.
All right. I'm just checking because we've got it's Stratford in East London, which is where they had the Olympics. It used to be a bit of a dodgy area, but okay. So there's a Stratford in Canada as well. Not surprising.
But Derek, I think
it's like a jam tart, but much thicker, higher, and obviously the surprise of having something in them that you're not expecting.
No, it's pure sugar. It's pure sugar. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And what have you got then, Derek?
I have the there we go, cherry blossom.
Whoa, what is that?
That's a very good question. So this was a childhood treat for me. I remember getting this at a variety store. Just if we were at a variety store, I would get it. I think my dad liked it. I think our whole family enjoyed this. And basically it is like a Terrazina. I kind of have to I looked it up the other day and I'm not going to retain facts. So it is a type of chocolate confection. We've actually had a quick debate and argument where I was like, a confection is candy and chocolate, and Babs like, no, it's butter tarts. So there's two types of confections, which I didn't realize. The butter tart pastry kind and the other. Anyway, so this has been manufactured since the 1890s, and it was by a company called Lowney, and since then Hershey has taken it over. But it is actually a Canadian confection, and it is a maraschino cherry coated in chocolate with a liquid center, and it has roasted peanut and coconut bits, chocolate inside.
I didn't know that they put an enzyme, because it's very sexual, really, when you look at it.
It's certainly oozing something out of that.
Little candy.
Your mind's in the gutter.
I know, but apparently they inject the cherry with an enzyme to make it liquefy within the chocolate. I found that scientifically fascinating.
It was.
I'm afraid to bite into this.
Yeah, we don't need to.
You don't need to do it on air.
But we're going to.
A corner.
A corner's fine.
What's the way to do
that is very interesting. I think that might be the most interesting one we've had on.
Oh, you have to have one if you can track it down. They're fantastic.
Oh, it's oozing out. There we go.
Oh, you've done it. You've lost the precious filling.
Oh, brilliant.
Upside down a bit.
That is an 1883, did you say they'd be making those?
1890s.
1890.
Oh yeah, which I didn't realize it was had such a history.
That's sweet.
I didn't realize how old it's super sweet. It's terrible.
I mean, I guess just back then it would have been crazy, but I mean, obviously even now it's still an interesting. Chris International, welcome, man. I recall cherry blossoms being very contentious.
Yes.
Yeah. Contentious.
They're very strange. And it's a very retro candy. And like even now to this day, like if you go to like some corner store in the middle of nowhere, like you can see a cherry blossom on the shelf and be like, is this a cherry blossom from like 1982? Or is this a cherry blossom like
the packaging looks quite retro, doesn't it? Like they've updated it.
Totally. Absolutely. They've kept it classic, which is great. It's beautiful packaging. It's fantastic.
That is very cool. Out of interest, what does that cost? What does one of those cost?
I think we went to a dollar store called Dollarama, which
Dollarama.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to my girlfriends who were like, "There's at the Dollarama, go!" And we went on a run yesterday. It was 89 cents a piece.
89. Okay, so it's not $1 then. So it's a dollar shop that's less than $1. Is that how it works over there?
Yeah.
Yes.
So here we have pound shops like Poundland and whatever else, but pretty much everything's a pound. But 89 cents. Okay. I don't know what the exchange rate is for Canadian dollars at the moment.
A little over a pound, I'm guessing.
Under a pound. Probably, yeah. Like probably 60 pence.
Oh yeah, 60 pence. Sorry, the other way.
60 pence. Okay, cool. All right. I've got a couple things here. So these were my daughter's. She was given them, but I bring them back because she left me some, which is always very kind. She normally eats most of my sweets. I don't know if you have these. Do you have Marks and Spencer's in Canada? Do you know Marks?
We used to.
Okay. Porky pigs. Were they ever a big thing in America? In Canada, sorry.
No. No,
I'm familiar
But
with
these are not the original Percy Pigs. These are like the fruit chews ones. So they're sort of like that. But the original Percy Pig is like a sort of round pig, and and then they had like veggie pigs and like gelatine and all that. But they're pretty famous in the UK, and there's a ghetto funk crew called Too Good, and one of them loved Percy Pig so much that he got this character, so this pig character tattooed on his leg. And it got in the local newspaper, and then Marks and Spencer's were like, "That's amazing!" So they sent him enough sort of Percy Pigs to fill a bath, and he had this whole photo shoot of him in a bath filled with these Percy Pigs. But I love them. They're great. This isn't the original because I couldn't find the original, but this is like the Polish version. But these are called like sesame snaps. I don't know if you can see very well.
Oh yeah, love sesame snaps.
Obviously, my parents are both from Cyprus, and we have them over there, and we used to have them loads when we grew up. But you can still pick them out. I think this is the Polish version. And then last one. Again, we were talking about things being like crack. I love Biscoff, and I don't know if have you got Biscoff over in America? I keep saying America. Sorry, Canada. Do you know what Biscoff is?
No.
Okay, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's caramelized sandwiched biscuits with a milk chocolate flavor filling. They started off and they were the little biscuits that you'd get with your coffee, and it's almost like a sort of caramelly biscuit, and then they've suddenly gone huge over here. So these are quite unusual because these got milk chocolate in the middle, but they've also now got ice cream Biscoff, and I mean, this is since 1932. I'd like to suspect they only seem to have taken off in the last few years. I don't know where they were before, but
you had me at caramel. You had me at caramel.
Yeah, well, yeah. When you come to the UK, or we'll send some over. We'll send a food package over. Right. Okay. Let's do that one, then we'll get on the same screen. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, I could talk to you forever, and I think at some point I'm planning to sort of get some of the guests back, and maybe like in the 6 months' time, a year's time, see where we all are, because hopefully in a year's time this pandemic would have moved on a little bit, and we can see where we all are and what we're all doing. It would be quite interesting to sort of have a sort of review in a year's time, saying, okay, we're now doing this, or we now can do this. So so hopefully we'll definitely have you back on at some point, and hopefully on some more live streams, some more 45 Queen stuff and some other raid events and things that we're doing. But thank you so much. You've all been extremely open, honest with your experiences, and thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you for doing this. I mean, again, just talking about things, and if anything, you can feel you're never alone. If that's the one thing that I can reinforce to anybody going through anything, that there is always someone to share and to talk to, whether it is a friend or a family member or a fellow DJ or someone in your community. And I'll share some links on my page for some mental health resources here in Canada as well too. And that just reach out. It helps.
We're going to do that. I'm just going to put a couple of links. I'm just going to see, because we're going to raid out to someone in a minute. I just need to check if they're actually online quickly. Okay, cool. That's fine. I'll do that in a second. I normally, obviously, you're all in Canada. We have, if anyone is in the UK, I think some of the viewers are, there's various mental health charities that are available, and we support quite a lot of them with the 3-day mental health awareness raids that we do, and the next one of that is coming up on the 13th, 14th, 15th of August, and that's something that Double P came up with, and I help him a bit with that, and we go all around the world and get DJs and stuff, and it's just raising awareness of it. I think that's so important, and then there's lots of other things coming up, but if you follow the channel, you'll see what's happening up. So I'm just going to get the raid going, and then I'll say goodbye, and then we'll go from there. It's just so you know where we're going. It's obviously the football today. I know that Teresina, you've been following it quite a lot, from what I can gather.
Yes.
Is that right?
I'm going to my mom's house after this, and she lives in an Italian neighborhood, so it'll be interesting what the result will be.
There's been a lot of bizarrely people in the UK sort of saying they're not going to eat Italian food since England got into the final because they don't want to jinx it. But yeah, I don't know. We will see it. I can't quite believe I'm sitting here talking to you saying that England are in the final. I used to be a huge football fan when I was younger, not so much now, but the fact that they're in the final in my lifetime is just, it's crazy, but we'll see. But we're going to raid over to Frankie 45. Sideshow Mall's been doing this thing called the Euro Champion Spins, and we've had like a DJ from each country supporting it. And initially, there was one point where I was possibly going to be playing for Turkey, which would have been a bit tricky with my sort of Greek Cypriot background. But I've ended up playing for England, and here I am in the final, which is bizarre. And I'm just going to do, before we go, I'm just going to put in, oh no, that hasn't copied right. I've got your the link that you've given to me, but it's not copying it for some reason. Let me just copy it before we go. There we go. Okay, so that should now be in the chat. It's there, camh.ca, if anyone wants to speak to anyone from Canada. Right, I'm going to raid out. If you guys stay there, we'll have a quick chat before we go. And thanks for watching, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.